October 2025, Highway 47, Colorado Mountains, 6:47 p.m. The Mercedes E-Class died with the mechanical courtesy of German engineering. No warning lights, no sputtering protest, just a click and then silence that swallowed the mountain evening whole. Patricia Hayes sat on the gravel shoulder, watching the sun bleed orange behind the Rockies, her mind already calculating losses in the language she understood best: dollars and consequences. 40 million. That's what rode on her physical presence in a Denver conference room 14 hours from now. And her phone kept cycling between one bar of signal and none. The universe's small cruelty for someone who paid AT&T premium rates for coverage that apparently stopped existing the moment you needed it most. The road stretched empty in both directions, 2 lanes of asphalt cutting through wilderness that had outlasted empires and would outlast her quarterly projections without noticing either. She'd left Denver 90 minutes ago after closing the Southwestern Freight acquisition. 3 years of negotiations finally signed, and instead of celebrating with her team, she'd gotten in her car and driven because the congratulations felt hollow. And her CFO, Rebecca Clark, had given her that look when Patricia declined the after-party. The look that said, "We both know you're running from something, but I'm too professional to name it." 15 years. That's how long she'd been building Donovan Logistics, from a single truck and a business loan into a regional empire worth $70 million. 15 years of walking into rooms that didn't want her, of smiling through condescension that came wrapped in compliments, of trading everything that made existence bearable for market share and the kind of respect that evaporated the moment you left the boardroom. The respect she had. The bearable part remained theoretical. Headlights crested the hill behind her. Old Ford F-25. Oh, blue paint faded to the color of decade-old bruises. Magnetic sign on the door, too dust-covered, to read in the dying light. Patricia stood, smoothing her Armani jacket like armor, her corporate instincts cataloging threats, even as her rational mind knew a broken-down CEO on a mountain road had exactly one option, and it looked like a rusted pickup truck. The Ford pulled onto the shoulder with a mechanical wheeze that suggested strong opinions about stopping. The driver's door opened, and a man unfolded himself from the cab. Tall, black, maybe 40, wearing coveralls that had survived better decades. Grease stained his hands and forearms in patterns that spoke of competence rather than carelessness, and he moved with an unhurried confidence that made Patricia's business instincts prickle. Men who moved like that either owned boardrooms or had decided boardrooms weren't worth owning. His voice carried the warm roughness of someone who measured words before spending them. "Evening, ma'am. Need some help?" Patricia gestured at her Mercedes with more irritation than the situation warranted. Anger at herself for not checking the service schedule, for driving into mountains without backup plans, for being the kind of person who forgot that machines required maintenance and roads didn't care about your deadline. It died. No warning. I have roadside assistance, but she held up her phone, signal bars flickering like a dying heartbeat. The man nodded once, already moving toward her hood. "Mind if I take a look?" Something about his voice tickled the edge of Patricia's memory, familiar in a way she couldn't place. But she'd met thousands of people in 15 years of business. This mechanic in his faded coveralls shouldn't register as anything except convenient salvation. "Please." He popped the hood without fumbling for the release, muscle memory that spoke of years spent under them, and his movements were economical in a way that reminded Patricia of surgeons she'd dated briefly before they'd asked her to choose between them and her company. She'd chosen the company without hesitation and refused to catalog that choice under regrets. The mechanic's hands stilled on her battery terminal, then moved with sudden purpose. Patricia found herself watching those hands. Broad palms, long fingers, the kind that could grip a steering wheel or hold something delicate with equal certainty. Not that she was cataloging a stranger's hands. She was thinking about $40 million evaporating because luxury vehicles apparently failed at the worst possible moments. He straightened, wiping his hands on a rag that emerged from his back pocket with practiced ease. Just a loose connection. Try it now. Patricia slid behind the wheel, turned the key. The engine roared to life with embarrassing enthusiasm, as if mechanical failure had been a temporary lapse in judgment rather than genuine breakdown. Relief hit first, followed by irritation at herself for the relief. She was Patricia Hayes, CEO of Donovan Logistics. She'd negotiated with union bosses and venture capitalists and senators who thought women her age should smile more. A broken-down car shouldn't reduce her to this species of desperate gratitude. She stepped out, reaching for her wallet with hands that trembled slightly from adrenaline crash. "How much do I owe you?" The mechanic shook his head, already closing her hood with a gentleness that contradicted his calloused palms. "Nothing, ma'am. Just helping out." Patricia pulled $300 bills from her wallet, more than the repair justified, less than the deal she'd have lost without it. "No, seriously, that's not right. You stopped, you fixed it. I don't charge neighbors for roadside help." His voice held no judgment, just statement of fact, the way someone might mention the sky was blue or mountains were tall. "I'm not a neighbor. I'm from Denver." Patricia thrust the bills toward him with more force than necessary. The gesture, aggressive, in a way business school had taught her, signaled strength, but right now just felt rude. He accepted her business card. She didn't remember offering it, but apparently her hand had moved on autopilot, but left the cash hovering in the air between them. His eyes, dark brown and warm in a way that made Patricia's chest constrict, scanned the card briefly before meeting hers again. Something flickered across his face, recognition or curiosity, or some combination gone before she could name it. "Well, Ms. Hayes." He handed back her card, his fingers brushing hers for a fraction of a second. "Safe travels." He walked to his truck before she could argue further, moving with that same unhurried certainty, and the magnetic sign came into focus as he passed. Johnson Auto Repair, Ridgemont, Colorado. Patricia stood on the shoulder holding $300 and a business card that suddenly felt heavier than it should, watching his taillights disappear around the curve. The valley had gone full dark while he worked, stars emerging with that aggressive clarity they achieved at altitude, and something about his voice kept echoing in her skull. The way he'd moved, the warmth in his eyes when he'd smiled. She'd met him before. She was certain of it. The certainty followed her all the way back to Denver, through the closing meeting next morning that went flawlessly, thank you German engineering, and into her penthouse that evening. 43rd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking a city that looked beautiful from this height and sterile from this distance. She poured 2 fingers of bourbon she wouldn't finish and pulled out her laptop, typing into Google because that voice wouldn't stop resonating in places she'd thought she'd sealed off years ago. Johnson Auto Repair, Ridgemont, Colorado. The shop's website was basic, clearly built from a template in 2015 and never updated, but the reviews told stories that made Patricia's throat tight. "Marcus is the most honest mechanic in Colorado, fixed my transmission for half what the dealer quoted, helped me when I couldn't afford the repair, wouldn't take payment when I came back 6 months later with the money. This man saved my life literally. Car broke down in a snowstorm with my kids in the back. Marcus drove 2 hours in the middle of the night to get us. Refused payment. We're not even from Ridgemont. Marcus Johnson, The name meant nothing. Patricia clicked through to the shop's Facebook page, mostly dormant, except for occasional photos of repairs, and her breath caught. A little girl, 8, maybe 9, black with natural hair, pulled into twin puffs, wearing a soccer uniform and holding a trophy, gap-toothed smile that could sell toothpaste. The caption, "Emily's team took second place. So proud of my girl." Patricia scrolled further back past carburetors and brake pads until she found what instinct told her she was looking for. An obituary shared 4 years ago. Sarah Johnson, 36, beloved elementary school teacher, died August 2021 in a car accident on Highway 70. She is survived by her husband Marcus Johnson and daughter Emily, age 4. A celebration of life will be held. Patricia's hand shook on her trackpad. She clicked through Sarah's tagged photos with the horrible fascination of someone watching their past collide with someone else's present. A beautiful black woman with a teacher's warm smile, always surrounded by books or children or both. Wedding photos from what looked like 2011. Marcus in a suit that fit him badly. Sarah in a simple white dress, both radiating the kind of joy Patricia had spent 15 years too busy to feel. She scrolled through Marcus's older photos, past the grief and the garage, back to college years, sparse postings from what looked like engineering labs. One photo of him in a hard hat at some kind of factory. The image loaded, and Patricia's bourbon glass hit the table hard enough to slosh amber liquid across mahogany. She didn't notice, couldn't notice, because the man in that decade-old photo, younger and leaner, but unmistakably the same. "Oh my God." Her voice came out as a whisper in her empty penthouse. "That's Marcus. That's Marcus from Westfield." The memory hit with physical force. October 2010, Westfield University, Pennsylvania. Patricia Miller. That's what she'd been called then, before she'd taken her father's name, Hayes, and buried Miller along with everything else from that version of herself. Walking across campus at 11:47 on a Tuesday night because the library kicked everyone out at 11:30 and she had a paper due in 48 hours and maybe 3 hours of sleep in the last 2 days. The path to her dorm cut through the quad, empty at this hour, except for, hey, where are you going?" 3 of them, frat letters on their jackets, drunk enough to think blocking her path was funny, or perhaps drunk enough to think worse things than funny. Patricia froze with the exhausted calculation of someone who'd spent 23 years learning which battles to fight and which to survive. "Excuse me." "Come on, baby, just talk to us." The tallest one, blonde, with a quarterback's build, stepped closer. His friends laughed, like he'd said something clever. "You too good for us?" Patricia's hand tightened on her backpack strap. She had pepper spray somewhere in there if she could reach it without them noticing, and she was running probability calculations about whether screaming would bring campus police before things escalated when, "Gentlemen," the voice came from behind the frat boys, calm and almost conversational, but something in it made all 3 turn. A young man materialized from the darkness, black, maybe 25, wearing an engineering department hoodie and carrying a battered laptop bag. Not huge, but solid, the kind of solid that came from real work instead of weight rooms. "The lady wants to pass." The quarterback bristled, alcohol courage making him stupid. "Who the hell are you?" "Tired." The young man didn't raise his voice. "Had a long day, looking forward to sleep. So let's all just take a breath and head our separate ways." Something in his tone, not threat exactly, but the promise of consequence, made the drunk boys recalculate. Maybe the steadiness in his stance. Maybe the fact that he'd positioned himself between them and the campus police station 2 buildings over. The quarterback spat something uncreative and crude, but he moved. His friends followed, their laughter already twisting the encounter into a story where they'd chosen to leave rather than been dismissed. Patricia released the breath she'd been holding, her voice shakier than she wanted it to be. "Thank you. They were just drunk, probably harmless. But you shouldn't have to calculate probabilities at 11 at night," his voice said without saying it. He smiled, and something in Patricia's chest unknotted. "I'm Marcus Johnson, engineering." "Patricia Miller, business." She paused. "And thank you, really." They stood in the quad for a moment, October air cold enough to see their breath. Marcus gestured toward the dorms. "Which building? I'll walk you." Patricia should have said no, should have thanked him again and handled herself, but something about the way he'd said the lady wants to pass, not girl, not sweetheart, not any of the diminutives she'd spent her life deflecting, made her nod. They walked in silence for maybe 30 seconds before Marcus spoke again. "You're in Morrison's business strategy class, Tuesdays and Thursdays." Patricia glanced at him, surprised. "How did you—" "I'm in his physics class, same lecture hall, hour before yours. I've seen you coming in as I'm leaving." He smiled. "You always look like you're going to war." "Business school is war." The words came out sharper than Patricia intended. "Sorry, it's just, I'm on scholarship, full ride. If I lose it—" She stopped herself. She didn't talk about this. Didn't talk about her mother or the drinking or the eviction notices or why a full scholarship was the difference between college and the life she'd escaped. Marcus nodded like she'd said all of it anyway. "My mom's sick. Cancer. Stage 4 lung. Dad died 2 years ago, so I'm here on loans I'll probably never pay off, working 3 jobs, trying to finish my engineering degree before the money runs out, or she does." Patricia stopped walking. "I'm sorry. God, I'm complaining about stress when you're dealing with—" "Doesn't work like that." Marcus's voice stayed gentle. "Your stress doesn't cancel mine. We're all just doing our best with what we've got." They reached Patricia's dorm building. She should have said good night, should have thanked him one more time and gone inside to finish her paper. Instead, she heard herself say, "Do you want to sit, just for a minute?" They sat on the concrete steps. 1 minute became an hour became 3. By the time the sun started graying the eastern sky, Patricia knew that Marcus wanted to start his own engineering consulting firm someday, help communities build infrastructure they couldn't afford, use his degree to make things better rather than just profitable. Marcus knew that Patricia wanted to build a business from nothing, prove that someone from her background, broken home, alcoholic mother, food stamps and hand-me-downs, could create something that mattered, could be somebody. "That's the dream," Patricia had said, watching dawn paint the sky. "Build something so big, so successful, that nobody can ever tell me I don't belong again." Marcus had looked at her with those warm brown eyes and said something Patricia would spend the next 15 years trying to live up to. "You already belong. You just have to believe it yourself." Then he'd kissed her, soft, careful, like she was something precious that might break if he wasn't gentle. Patricia had never been kissed like that before, like she mattered beyond what she could provide. "Can I see you again?" Marcus's voice had roughness in it that sent heat through her despite the October cold. "Tomorrow, same place." But tomorrow never came. 1 week later, Marcus Johnson vanished from Westfield University like smoke. Patricia searched, asked his roommate, his professors, anyone who might know. Finally learned through a friend of a friend that his mother's cancer had accelerated, months turning to weeks. Marcus had withdrawn, gone home to Cleveland, taken a job at Boeing to pay for hospice care. No forwarding address, no phone number, no social media that Patricia could find in 2010 when Facebook was still new and LinkedIn barely existed. Gone. Present day. Denver penthouse. Patricia stared at her laptop screen, at the face that had haunted her for 15 years, now older and weathered, but unmistakably the same. Marcus Johnson, the man who'd saved her from drunk frat boys, who'd talked to her about dreams until sunrise, who'd kissed her like she was worth the careful handling. And he'd just fixed her car on a mountain road without recognizing her at all. Patricia looked at her reflection in the darkened window. Blonde hair where there had been brown, dyed and highlighted by stylists who charged more per hour than her mother had earned in a week. Contact lenses where there had been wire-rimmed glasses, 40 pounds lighter after 15 years of expensive trainers and the kind of discipline that came from hating your own softness. Voice coached smooth by corporate communication consultants who'd taught her to project authority by lowering her register and flattening the working-class accent that marked you as not belonging. She looked nothing like the uncertain scholarship student who'd met Marcus Johnson on library steps. But he was exactly who he'd been. Older, yes, weathered by grief. But those hands, that voice, the way he'd smiled when he'd closed her hood, the same man who'd told her she belonged. Patricia made a decision fueled by bourbon and 15 years of wondering what if. She opened her calendar, canceled her Thursday meetings, 7 of them worth a combined $2 million in potential contracts, and sent an email to Rebecca. Taking rest of week remote. Emergency family matter. Hold all calls except Southwestern. Then she opened Google Maps and searched for Ridgemont, Colorado. Population 4,800, 93 miles from Denver, the kind of town where everybody knew everybody, and strangers stood out like blood on snow. She booked a cabin on Airbnb, the only rental available, 1 bedroom on the edge of town, and started packing before she could talk herself out of it. Marcus Johnson didn't remember her. Fine, she'd give him reasons to. The drive to Ridgemont took 2 hours because Patricia got lost twice, her GPS insisting on routes that existed on maps but not reality. She arrived at 10:17 in the morning, the sun bright enough to make the mountains look fake, like screensavers come to life. Johnson Auto Repair sat on Main Street between a hardware store that predated Colorado statehood and a coffee shop whose hand-painted sign promised Mountain Brew Coffee, best in the Rockies since 1987. 2 bays, both open, a cherry-red Chevy truck hoisted on the left lift, Marcus's blue F250 parked at an angle that suggested hurry rather than carelessness. Patricia drove past twice before parking across the street, watching through the coffee shop window while pretending to work on her laptop. Spreadsheets open, but her eyes tracking movement in the garage. Marcus emerged from under the Chevy at 11:23, wiping his hands on that same rag. And even from this distance, Patricia could see the precision in his movements, the economy of motion. Nothing wasted, nothing rushed. A woman appeared from the shop's office. 50s, Latina, wearing a Johnson Auto Repair t-shirt and the expression of someone who'd heard every excuse. She said something that made Marcus laugh, the sound carrying across the street and even through the coffee shop's closed door. Patricia's chest constricted. That laugh. She remembered that laugh from dawn conversations on concrete steps, from moments before a kiss that had meant everything to her and apparently nothing to him since he'd disappeared without explanation. Not fair, the rational part of her mind insisted. His mother died. He had reasons, but he could have called, could have written, could have given her anything except silence. The barista materialized beside Patricia's table with a knowing smile. "Help you, honey?" Patricia looked up at a woman in her 50s, Maria, according to her name tag, who radiated the particular omniscience of small-town coffee shop employees who'd seen everything twice. "Just coffee. Black." Maria poured from a fresh pot, studying Patricia with eyes that missed nothing. "You're the CEO from yesterday. The one Marcus helped on Highway 47. Of course. In towns this size, helping a stranded CEO probably counted as news, worthy of discussion. Guilty. I wanted to thank him properly. Bring lunch or something. Maria's smile gentled into something complicated. Marcus Johnson is the best man I've ever known. Lost his wife 4 years back. Raises his daughter alone, works 70 hours a week, still finds time to help folks who can't pay. The words landed like weights on Patricia's chest. He mentioned his daughter. Emily, 8 years old, smart as a whip, hasn't had an easy time of it since Sarah passed. Maria refilled Patricia's coffee without asking. Marcus doesn't date. Hasn't even looked at a woman in 4 years. Too busy being father and mechanic and the person everybody in this town leans on. The warning in her voice was gentle but clear. Don't hurt him. This man has been hurt enough. Patricia met Maria's eyes, making her own decision about what to reveal and what to protect. I'm not here to hurt him. I'm here because, how did you explain 15 years of measuring every man against a memory? Because I owe him more than a thank you for fixing my car. Maria studied her for a long moment, then nodded. He breaks for lunch at noon, usually eats at his desk, but if someone brought him food he actually liked instead of the garbage from the vending machine, he might take 30 minutes. Patricia checked her watch. 11:47. What does he like? Maria's smile turned genuine. Turkey and Swiss Henri, extra mustard, salt and vinegar chips. And he's got a sweet tooth he pretends he doesn't. So anything chocolate will make him happy even while he's protesting. Patricia stood, leaving a 20 for a $5 coffee. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Maria's voice carried new weight. You break him. I know where you sleep. The deli was 2 blocks down, run by a couple in their 70s who took Patricia's order with the slow deliberation of people who'd stopped hurrying 30 years ago. She added a chocolate chunk cookie the size of a salad plate and walked back to Johnson Auto Repair at exactly 12:03. Marcus saw her through the bay window. Surprise flickered across his face before settling into wary welcome. He emerged from the shop, wiping his hands, always wiping his hands like he could never quite get them clean. Miss Hayes, everything okay with the car? Perfect. Patricia held up the bag from the deli. Lunch, if you have time. I wanted to thank you properly. Marcus glanced back at the shop, then at his watch, calculation playing across his features. Patricia recognized that look, the same one she wore in boardrooms when deciding if a risk was worth taking. 30 minutes. There's a car due at 1. They walked to Mountain Brew Coffee, settling at the same table where Patricia had interrogated Maria 90 minutes earlier. Marcus unwrapped his sandwich with care that bordered on reverence, noting the expensive packaging, but saying nothing. Patricia watched him take that first bite, saw the surprise in his eyes when the sandwich met expectations he clearly hadn't had. Maria told you what I like? Not a question. Patricia nodded. She's protective of you. Whole town is. Marcus took another bite, chewed thoughtfully. Ridgemont takes care of its own. I'm lucky that way. They ate in silence for a moment. Patricia searched for an opening, some way to say, I know you from 15 years ago that wouldn't sound insane. Marcus spoke first, his voice careful in a way that suggested he'd been thinking about this question. Can I ask you something? Shoot. Why'd you really come back? He set down his sandwich, meeting her eyes across the table. CEOs don't usually drive 90 miles to bring lunch to mechanics. The directness caught Patricia off guard. She'd expected small talk, the social lubrication that preceded difficult conversations. But Marcus had never been one for that. Even 15 years ago, he'd cut straight to what mattered. Patricia set down her half-eaten sandwich, holding his gaze. You remind me of someone from a long time ago, someone important. Interest sharpened in Marcus's eyes. Yeah, someone who showed me kindness when I needed it most. She stopped, the rest of the sentence lodged in her throat, and then disappeared before I could say thank you. Marcus studied her face with an intensity that made Patricia's pulse jump, almost recognition, hovering just beyond reach, like a word on the tip of your tongue. Well, I hope I measure up to the memory. Before Patricia could respond, a yellow school bus rumbled past the window. Marcus checked his watch and stood with the abruptness of a man remembering obligations. That's Emily's bus. I need to. You have a daughter. Patricia stood too, buying seconds. Emily. Maria mentioned her. Something softened in Marcus's expression, transformation from weary mechanic to proud father, instant and complete. Emily, 8 years old, smart enough to scare me. Science fair this Friday. He caught himself, face shifting to something like embarrassment. Sorry, you're busy. You don't need to hear about elementary school science projects. Patricia made a decision that would alter the trajectory of 6 months. I'd like to hear about it. See it, if that's okay. Marcus stared at her, surprise and confusion and something else. Hope, maybe, or the ghost of it, playing across his features. It's at Ridgemont Elementary, Friday night, 6 o'clock. Projects about friction energy generation. Way above my pay grade, but Emily loves it. I'll be there. The promise hung between them, weighted with significance neither of them could name yet. Marcus nodded slowly, then gathered his sandwich wrapper and stood. Thank you for lunch. Really, it was nice. He left before Patricia could find more words. She watched him cross Main Street with that same economical stride, disappearing into his shop like a man with 1,000 things demanding attention. Her phone buzzed. Rebecca with a question about the Southwestern acquisition that would take 3 seconds to answer. Patricia typed a response, then looked at the calendar notification for Friday. Board dinner in Denver, 7 figures worth of networking with potential investors. The kind of event she never missed, because missing it meant weakness, meant competitors smelled blood. Patricia canceled it with 2 taps and a text to Rebecca. Handle the board dinner. I have something more important. Friday evening, Ridgemont Elementary. Patricia arrived at 5:43, early enough to feel awkward, but late enough that setup was complete. The gymnasium had been transformed into a showcase of juvenile scientific ambition, poster boards and baking soda volcanoes, and what looked like a working model of the solar system that spun when you cranked a handle. She spotted Emily's table in the back corner before she saw Emily. The poster board proclaimed in careful block letters, Friction Energy Generation in Daily Life. Below the title, diagrams explained the concept with a clarity that suggested help from someone who actually understood engineering principles. A modified floor mat connected to LED lights demonstrated practical application. Step on the mat. Lights glowed brighter. Emily materialized beside the table, arranging handwritten note cards with the same precision Patricia applied to contract negotiations. 8 years old, those twin puffs of natural hair, gap-toothed smile currently hidden behind concentration. NASA t-shirt, jeans with grass stains, sneakers that had seen better days. Patricia approached carefully, hyper-aware she was entering territory where she didn't belong. Hi, I'm Patricia. Your dad invited me. Emily looked up, assessment in those brown eyes, Marcus's eyes, that made Patricia feel evaluated in ways boardrooms never achieved. You're the lady with the broken car. That's me. Patricia gestured at the display. Your project looks amazing. Emily's guard dropped half an inch, pride taking over. I'm showing how friction from walking can generate electricity. See? She demonstrated the mat setup, pointing to calculations showing projected power output from various activities. If every school hallway had friction mats, we could power 30% of LED lighting, maybe more. The thoroughness impressed Patricia more than she'd expected. This wasn't a kid parroting information. This was genuine understanding applied practically. This is sophisticated work. You must have spent weeks on it. 5 weeks. Dad helped with the wiring, but I did all the math myself. Pride colored Emily's voice, the kind that came from knowing you'd done something well and wanting recognition. I had to make sure it was right. Patricia understood that hunger. She'd lived on it for 15 years. Before she could respond, the poster board support began tilting backward. Someone had bumped the table behind them, throwing off the weight distribution. The whole display threatened collapse. 5 weeks of work about to scatter across gymnasium floor. Patricia's hand shot out on instinct, catching the board before it could fall. But the position was unstable. If she let go, everything collapsed. Emily's face went pale. The judges come in 5 minutes. Do you have extra supports? No, I use them all for the base. Panic edged into Emily's voice, the kind that preceded tears in children who prided themselves on competence. It's going to fall. My project's going to... It's not. Patricia scanned the area, mind shifting into problem-solving mode that had built her company. Her purse. The business cards inside were thick stock, substantial enough to work if she could create the right angle. I have an idea. Trust me? Emily nodded, desperation overriding suspicion. Patricia pulled out her card holder, extracted a handful of cards, began folding them into triangular supports. Physics she'd learned from Professor Morrison, from the same lectures Marcus had attended an hour before hers, came back. Principles of leverage and weight distribution that had seemed abstract in textbooks proved concrete in crisis. She wedged the folded cards under the poster board's base at precise angles, creating a stable tripod that distributed weight evenly. The board stopped tilting, held firm even when Emily tested it with cautious pressure. How did you know to do that? Patricia looked at Emily, at Marcus's eyes in a child's face, and told the truth. Your dad taught me. Same class where we met, actually. He explained physics using car parts and real-world examples, made it all make sense in a way textbooks never did. Something shifted in Emily's expression, not quite trust, but the opening where trust could grow. Dad's really smart about that stuff. He can fix anything. He is, and so are you, judging by this project. The judges arrived before Emily could respond, 3 teachers armed with clipboards and encouraging smiles. They asked technical questions that Emily answered with confidence, blooming under attention, explaining methodology and findings with the clear voice of someone who knew her subject cold. Patricia stepped back, watching this child who'd lost her mother transform into an enthusiastic scientist discussing her passion. When the judges moved to the next table, Emily turned to Patricia with something that might have been the beginning of a smile. Thank you for helping with the board. I was afraid it would fall and ruin everything. Teamwork, Patricia echoed words she'd heard 15 years ago. Your dad taught me that too. Always use what you have to solve the problem in front of you. Emily studied her with that unnerving 8-year-old directness. You really knew Dad a long time ago, didn't you? Like you actually remember him. You're not just making it up. The question carried weight beyond its simple words, as if Emily were trying to determine whether Patricia's interest in her father was genuine or some incomprehensible adult game. "I knew him, and he was one of the best people I'd ever met. Still is, apparently." Emily opened her mouth to respond, but Marcus's voice cut through the gymnasium noise. "Emily, I made it!" He rushed over, still wearing his work shirt with fresh grease stains, his face carrying the particular stress of a parent who'd promised to be somewhere and nearly failed. He stopped short when he saw Patricia, kneeling beside his daughter, expression cycling through surprise, confusion, and something that looked like cautious pleasure. "Patricia, you actually came." "I said I would." Emily tugged Marcus's sleeve, eager to share her moment. "Dad, I got third place, and Patricia helped me fix my board when it almost fell. She used her business cards to make supports, like physics with triangles and weight." Pride transformed Marcus's face, pure and uncomplicated, in a way that made Patricia's throat tight. He scooped Emily up in a hug that lifted her off the ground, spinning once before setting her back down. "Third place is amazing, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." Patricia helped. Emily looked between them, calculation in her young eyes. "She said you taught her about physics. She used triangles to save my project." Marcus's gaze found Patricia's over Emily's head, something complex and searching in his expression, almost recognition, so close she could see him reaching for it, but not quite there. The principal announced final winners, drawing families toward the front of the gymnasium. Emily grabbed both adults' hands with the unself-conscious assumption that they belonged together, pulling them along. Marcus's fingers tensed in Emily's grip, caught between following his daughter's lead and maintaining boundaries he'd tried to establish. Patricia felt the conflict in him, the same war she'd been fighting since recognizing his face on her laptop screen. They stood at the edge of the crowd as the principal praised participants and handed certificates to category winners. Emily bounced on her toes when her name was called, rushing forward to accept her award with a grin that echoed her mother's in photographs Patricia had studied like scripture. When Emily returned, clutching certificate and ribbon like treasures, Marcus suggested ice cream from the local shop. Emily agreed with enthusiasm, then turned to Patricia with an expression that mingled hope and residual wariness. "Do you want to come? Dad makes really good sundaes at home." The invitation clearly surprised Marcus, but he didn't contradict his daughter. Instead, he looked at Patricia with a question in his eyes that went deeper than ice cream, asking whether she was ready for the next step into their lives, however small it might seem. Patricia thought about her cabin rental, about the work emails piling up, about the board members probably furious she'd skipped dinner, about 15 years of choosing business over everything else. She thought about Marcus's hands on her battery terminal, about a kiss on library steps, about the measuring stick she'd used on every relationship since. "I'd love to, if that's okay with your dad." Marcus hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Yeah, that's okay. More than okay, actually." They walked to Marcus's truck, Emily chattering about her project and other displays she'd seen, her natural enthusiasm breaking through protective shells she'd worn earlier. Marcus's F250 was parked beside Patricia's rental sedan, the contrast between them almost comical. $40,000 BMW next to a truck held together by faith and welding expertise. Emily climbed into the back seat with automatic movements of routine. Marcus paused before getting in, meeting Patricia's eyes across his truck bed in the parking lot's sodium lights. "Follow me. It's about 10 minutes if you don't get stuck behind the mail truck." His directions were simple, but his voice carried undercurrents of significance. He was inviting her into his home, into the life he'd built without her knowing she existed anymore. Both of them understood this meant something beyond dessert. Patricia followed his taillights through Ridgemont's evening streets, past hardware stores and churches, and a combination barbershop bait shop that suggested the town's priorities hadn't changed much since 1987. The houses got smaller as they drove, more modest, working-class neighborhoods where people fixed their own cars and mowed their own lawns because paying someone else wasn't an option. Marcus's house was a ranch style that had seen better decades, well-maintained but showing its age like an athlete past his prime. Small yard with a basketball hoop that had weathered too many Colorado winters. Emily's bicycle leaning against the garage door, training wheels long since removed. Nothing fancy, nothing designed to impress, just a place where a man was raising his daughter and trying to keep going despite grief that probably still woke him up at 3 in the morning. Patricia parked behind Marcus's truck, hands shaking on the steering wheel hard enough that she had to grip it tighter to make them stop. She was about to walk into Marcus Johnson's house, about to meet his life, about to discover if the man who'd told her she belonged 15 years ago could still recognize her when she'd spent those 15 years becoming someone else entirely. Emily led the way inside, dropping her backpack by the door and heading straight for the kitchen with the confidence of someone on home territory. Patricia stepped through the entrance more carefully, taking in details that told stories without words. Photos on the wall chronicled Emily's growth from infant to present. Many included a beautiful black woman with warm brown eyes who must have been Sarah. The furniture was comfortable but worn, chosen for durability over style. Everything spoke of a life built on modest means and strong foundations, priorities that had nothing to do with impressing visitors. Patricia's penthouse in Denver cost more per month than this house probably cost to buy. But standing in Marcus Johnson's living room, she understood with sudden clarity which space felt more like home. Emily directed ice cream operations with the authority of a general commanding troops. Vanilla first, then chocolate, then hot fudge in precise order. Marcus protested that he'd taught her this recipe, earning an eye roll that suggested 8-year-olds had mastered sarcasm earlier than Patricia remembered from her own childhood. The kitchen smelled like coffee and something vanilla, not artificial air freshener, but the real thing, maybe extract spilled during baking. Photographs covered the refrigerator in layers held by magnets advertising local businesses. Emily at various ages. Sarah in classroom settings, surrounded by students. A wedding photo. Marcus and Sarah young and radiant before grief had etched lines around his eyes. Patricia accepted her sundae with hands that wanted to shake, sat at the kitchen table while Emily finished hers in approximately 90 seconds, chocolate smeared at the corner of her mouth in a way that made her look younger than 8. "Can I watch a show before bed, Dad?" Marcus checked his watch. Parent math. This calculating screen time versus bedtime routines. 1 episode, then teeth brushing and pajamas. Emily scampered off to the living room, leaving Patricia alone with Marcus in a kitchen that suddenly felt smaller. He stood to clear bowls with the automatic efficiency of single-parent life, not asking if Patricia wanted to stay or go, just assuming she'd participate in the cleanup. She stood anyway, gathering her own bowl, their hands brushed, reaching for the same spoon. The contact sent electricity up Patricia's arm, sharp enough to make her breath catch. Marcus felt it too, his hand stilled on the dish soap bottle, knuckles whitening before he forced them to relax. "You don't have to help. I want to." They washed dishes in silence that should have been awkward but wasn't. Patricia dried while Marcus washed, falling into rhythm that felt practiced despite being their first time. Through the doorway they could hear Emily's show, something animated with chipper music and life lessons delivered in rhyme. Marcus broke the silence first, his voice quiet enough that Emily wouldn't overhear. "Can I ask what you're doing here? Not tonight. I mean in Ridgemont. You've got a company to run, deals to close. This isn't your world." Patricia set down the plate she'd been drying, choosing words with the care she usually reserved for contract negotiations. "Maybe I'm tired of my world. Maybe I'm looking for something that feels real." "And you think you'll find it in a town of 5,000 people, where the biggest excitement is Friday night football?" There was no judgment in his voice, just genuine curiosity mixed with something that sounded like self-deprecation. "I think I already found it 15 years ago, and then I lost it." She stopped herself. Too much, too soon. "Maybe I'm just tired of being lonely in a city of millions." Marcus turned off the water, dried his hands on a towel that had seen too many washes. When he looked at her, really looked, Patricia felt exposed in ways boardrooms never achieved. "Loneliness I understand, but, Patricia, Ms. Hayes, we barely know each other. You helped my daughter tonight, and I'm grateful. But building something real takes more than gratitude and good intentions." Emily's voice called from the living room, saving Patricia from having to formulate a response. "Dad, my show's over." Marcus moved toward the doorway, then paused with his hand on the frame. "Thank you for coming tonight, for helping Emily. It meant something to her, means something to me." He left before Patricia could parse the difference between meant and means, past versus present tense, carrying weight she didn't want to examine. She gathered her purse, preparing to leave, when Emily appeared in the kitchen doorway, wearing pajamas, covered in cartoon planets. "Are you leaving?" "I should. It's late, and you've got school tomorrow." Emily studied her with that unnerving directness children wielded like surgical instruments. "Are you coming back?" The question shouldn't have felt like standing on a cliff edge, but it did. Patricia crouched to Emily's eye level, meeting those brown eyes that were Marcus's eyes in a child's face. "Would you want me to?" Emily considered this with visible deliberation, calculation playing across features too young for that kind of burden. "Maybe. If you're not going to disappear when things get hard, Dad's been through enough." The words hit Patricia's chest like a physical blow. 8 years old and already building walls against abandonment, already protecting her father from potential hurt because she'd learned adults were unreliable. "I'm not planning to leave, but, Emily, I can't promise things won't get hard. Life's complicated." That's what grown-ups always say before they disappear. Marcus materialized behind his daughter, hands gentle on her shoulders. "Emily, that's not fair to Patricia." "But it's true." Emily's voice cracked on the last word, 8-year-old armor showing its seams. "Mom didn't mean to leave, but she did. And Aunt Sarah promised to visit, and she never came. And Miss Peterson at school said she'd help me with my project, but then she was too busy. Everybody leaves eventually." Patricia's throat constricted. She recognized that litany of broken promises, had compiled her own over 23 years before meeting Marcus the first time, before he'd shown her that maybe some people did keep their word. "You're right. People do leave, sometimes because they want to, sometimes because they have to, sometimes because life makes the choice for them." Patricia held Emily's gaze, refusing to offer empty comfort. "I can't promise I'll never leave, but I can promise that if I do, I'll tell you why. No disappearing, no wondering. Deal?" Emily studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but I'm watching you." "Fair enough." Marcus walked Patricia to her car, the Colorado night cold enough to see their breath. Stars emerged in that aggressive way they did at altitude, the Milky Way visible like a smear of light across darkness, that went on forever. Patricia paused with her hand on the car door. She's remarkable, Emily, smart and fierce and so much braver than she knows. She's terrified. Marcus's voice carried the exhaustion of 4 years of single parenting. Puts on a good show, but underneath she's just scared that I'll leave too. That she'll wake up one morning and I'll be gone like Sarah was. You won't, though. No, but 8-year-olds don't understand probability versus possibility. To Emily, loss is inevitable, just a matter of when. They stood in silence for a moment, breath fogging in the cold. Patricia wanted to tell him who she was, wanted to say, I'm Patricia Miller, from library steps, from physics class, from the dawn we spent talking about dreams. But the words stuck in her throat, because telling him meant facing the reality that he hadn't remembered her, that whatever she'd meant to him 15 years ago hadn't been enough to make her face stick in his memory. I should go. She opened her car door, cold air rushing out. But, Marcus, thank you for letting me be part of tonight, for trusting me with Emily. You earned it. Not many people would have helped her the way you did. Patricia drove back to her cabin with Marcus's words echoing. Not many people, as if kindness was rare instead of baseline human decency. But maybe in Marcus's experience, it was rare. Maybe losing Sarah had taught him that the world took more than it gave, and helping strangers fix their cars was his way of trying to balance the scales. The next 6 weeks blurred into a pattern that felt dangerously close to belonging. Patricia spent Mondays and Tuesdays in Denver, handling board meetings and investor calls from her penthouse that seemed emptier every time she returned. Wednesdays through Sundays, she worked from Mountain Brew Coffee, her laptop displaying spreadsheets, while her attention drifted toward the garage across the street. Marcus waved when he saw her through the window, small gestures that carried more weight than they should. Once, he brought her coffee when Maria was slammed, black, 2 sugars that Patricia hadn't told him she took. He'd remembered from the single cup they'd shared at lunch, the kind of attention to detail that made her chest ache. Emily's soccer games became appointment television. Patricia showed up without being invited, sitting in aluminum bleachers that froze through jeans, cheering when Emily scored, and staying silent when she didn't, because Marcus had mentioned his daughter hated pity applause. The third game, Emily looked for her in the stands before celebrating a goal, found her, grinned that gap-toothed smile, and Patricia's chest did something complicated and dangerous. Maria cornered her during week 3 with coffee and maternal concern. You're falling for him. Patricia didn't bother denying it. Probably have been for 15 years. Just didn't know it. And Emily scares you. I don't know how to be a mother. Don't know if I'd be any good at it. Maria stirred sugar into coffee she'd take black, the gesture automatic after years of customer service. Nobody knows if they'll be good at it. You just show up every day and try not to mess them up too badly. Riley needs stability more than perfection. Show up. Keep your promises. That's 90% of parenting right there. The school called during week 4. Emily had gotten into an argument with another student. Nothing physical, just words that had ended with Emily in the principal's office and the other kid in tears. Marcus asked Patricia to come with him to the meeting, voice tight with stress, and something that might have been hope that he didn't have to face this alone. The principal, a white woman in her 50s with the practiced sympathy of someone who'd handled 1,000 difficult conversations, explained that Emily had told another student her science project was stupid and wrong, with enough conviction to devastate the other child. Emily, that's not how we treat each other. Even if you disagree, you need to be kind. Emily's jaw set in a line Patricia recognized from Marcus. But her project was wrong. Ashley said friction always slows things down, but that's only half true. Friction also lets us walk without slipping, and generates heat and can produce electricity. Her project ignored all the good parts of friction. Principal Jennifer Miller looked at Marcus with weary patience. Mr. Johnson, while Emily's scientific accuracy is commendable, her delivery needs work. Marcus opened his mouth, probably to apologize and promise better, when Patricia heard herself speak. With respect, Principal Miller, if we penalize kids for being technically correct, we're teaching them that politeness matters more than truth. Maybe the lesson here is how to deliver accurate information without cruelty, not to suppress the accuracy. The principal's expression shifted from weary to annoyed. Marcus's hand found Patricia's under the table, squeezed once in what might have been gratitude or warning. They left with Emily unpunished, but strongly encouraged to work on her interpersonal skills. In Marcus's truck, Patricia's rental had a flat tire, convenient excuse for proximity. Emily spoke from the back seat. "Thank you for sticking up for me. Dad would have just apologized and promised I'd be nicer." Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I would have apologized because sometimes being part of a community means smoothing edges even when you're right. But Patricia—" He stopped himself. "Patricia doesn't live here full-time. She doesn't have to navigate the politics of small towns where everyone knows everyone and grudges last generations." The words weren't cruel, but they landed like weights. Patricia felt the distance they created, her presence helpful but temporary, her advocacy appreciated but ultimately uninformed by the realities Marcus navigated daily. That night, after Emily went to bed, Marcus found Patricia on his porch, trying to figure out if she should stay or go. "I didn't mean to. You were right to defend Emily. You're protecting her from consequences I don't understand. I get it." Patricia wrapped her jacket tighter against November cold. "I'm an outsider, playing at belonging. You live here part-time. You know how this works." "That's not what I meant. But it's true. I show up, disrupt your carefully balanced life, and assume my presence helps more than it complicates." Marcus moved closer, close enough that she could smell motor oil and coffee, and something underneath that was just him. "Your presence helps more than I want to admit, because admitting it means acknowledging how much I've been just going through motions for 4 years. His voice dropped to something raw. "I look forward to Wednesday mornings because that's when you come back from Denver. I make excuses to walk past the coffee shop. Emily asks about you every night before bed, not if you're coming back, when. We're getting attached, and that terrifies me because I don't know what you want from us." Patricia's breath crystallized in the cold air between them. "I want everything. You, Emily, this life that feels more real than anything I built in 15 years. But I don't know. I'm figuring it out as I go and probably making a mess of it." "We're all making a mess of it." Marcus's hand came up, cupped her face with calloused gentleness. "But maybe we can make a mess of it together." He kissed her then, not like 15 years ago on library steps. That had been careful and exploratory. First kiss, tentative with hope. This was neither. This was a widower remembering what want felt like, a CEO discovering that control was overrated, two people who'd been lonely too long finding momentary reprieve. They broke apart when breathing became necessary. Marcus's forehead rested against hers, both of them shaking from cold or adrenaline, or the terrifying realization that they'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "I should go." Patricia's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Emily's inside. This is too fast." Marcus didn't step back. "Also, 15 years too slow, depending how you count." Patricia drove to her cabin with lips that tasted like Marcus and a chest that felt simultaneously too full and completely hollow, opened her laptop to quarterly reports that suddenly seemed less important than the question of whether she'd just made the best or worst decision of her life. Her phone buzzed, text from Marcus. Thank you for defending Emily today and for understanding why I had to complicate it. Patricia typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on, anytime. That's what people who care do. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Are we doing this? Actually trying to build something? Patricia looked at her laptop, displaying company valuations and market projections, thought about the penthouse she'd stopped calling home, considered the board members who'd be furious about her stepping back, weighed all of it against Marcus's hands on her face and Emily's gap-toothed smile. Typed, I want to, if you'll let me. Marcus's response came immediately. Yes, let's figure it out together. Thanksgiving arrived with the subtlety of a freight train. Patricia flew to Denver Wednesday morning for board meetings she'd rescheduled twice already, sat through presentations about Q4 projections while her mind wandered to whether Marcus liked dark meat or white. If Emily had food allergies, what Sarah's family did for holidays, her assistant found her staring at her phone instead of reviewing merger documents. Miss Hayes, the investors are waiting. Patricia looked up at Karen, 26, and brilliant, and probably being groomed to replace Rebecca, when Rebecca replaced Patricia in the circular nature of corporate succession that suddenly felt depressing. Tell them I'm taking a personal day tomorrow. Cancel my Friday meetings. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving. You don't have Friday meetings scheduled. Right. Good. Patricia gathered her things. Tell them I have family obligations. She drove back to Ridgemont that night through weather that threatened snow, arriving at Marcus's house at 8:17 without having been invited, because somewhere in the last 5 weeks she'd started thinking of his house as a place she could show up. Emily answered the door in pajamas, surprise morphing into delight. Patricia, are you staying for Thanksgiving? Marcus appeared behind his daughter, wearing sweatpants and an MIT hoodie that made Patricia's breath catch because MIT meant engineering meant the past Marcus hadn't shared yet, pieces of him she was still discovering. I don't want to intrude. I wanted to see you both before tomorrow. Tomorrow you'll see us anyway. Emily's eye roll carried 8-year-old exasperation. I told you at my soccer game. You said you'd come if your work schedule allowed. Patricia vaguely remembered that conversation, distracted by Emily's grass-stained knees and Marcus watching from the sidelines with pride written across his face like prayer. My schedule allows. Marcus stepped back, letting her in from the cold. We're doing nothing fancy, just turkey and whatever sides I can manage without burning. Maria's bringing her family. Her kids are grown, but she claims we need supervision. His smile took the edge off. One more won't strain the table. They stood in his entryway, the house warm and smelling like cinnamon, Emily already retreating toward whatever show she'd been watching, leaving the adults to navigate unspoken questions about what Patricia's presence meant. I am restructuring the company, making it official. Rebecca becomes CEO in January. I'll be executive chair, strategic oversight, board meetings, but the day-to-day operations are hers. Marcus's expression shifted through surprise into something complicated. That's huge. Is this what you want? I built Donovan Logistics to prove I belonged somewhere. Patricia met his eyes, refusing to hide behind corporate language. Spent 15 years making it successful while forgetting to build a life worth having. I want something real. I want this, you and Emily and Thanksgiving dinners that aren't catered, if you'll have me. Marcus's voice carried weight she couldn't parse. Patricia, you're changing your entire life for... We've known each other 6 weeks. What if this doesn't work? What if you wake up in 6 months and realize you gave up your company for a relationship that couldn't survive? At some point, I have to either commit to building something new or accept I'm going to be lonely forever. Understanding flickered across Marcus's face, quick and gone before Patricia could name it. Who was he? The person you've been measuring everyone against? Patricia's throat constricted. The moment where she could tell the truth, admit who she'd been, explain that he was the measuring stick because he'd shown her what kindness looked like when she'd needed it most. Emily's voice called from the living room, breaking the moment. "Dad, the commercial's over." Marcus looked torn between daughter and conversation, then made the choice Patricia had watched him make 100 times. Emily first, everything else second. "Stay, watch the show with us. We'll talk later." They didn't talk later. They watched animated movies about talking animals learning life lessons. Emily wedged between them on a couch that had seen better years, her head eventually drooping onto Patricia's shoulder with the trust of children who'd decided someone was safe. Patricia sat frozen, terrified of moving and waking her, aware of Marcus watching them with an expression she couldn't read. When Emily finally went to bed, Patricia should have left, should have gone back to her cabin and processed the fact that she'd just felt more like family in Marcus Johnson's living room than she'd ever felt in her own penthouse. Instead, she stayed on the couch while Marcus cleaned up, too exhausted to move, too overwhelmed to speak. He returned with 2 beers, domestic, nothing craft or imported, and sat beside her with the careful distance of someone aware they'd almost crossed lines earlier. "Thank you for staying. Emily, she doesn't usually fall asleep on people, doesn't trust that easily. She's testing me, seeing if I'll keep showing up." "Are you going to keep showing up?" Patricia took a long pull of beer that tasted like college and bad decisions in the best possible way. "I'm here, aren't I? Giving up CEO for executive chair, spending more time in a town of 5,000 than a city of millions, missing board dinners to watch third graders present science projects." She set down the bottle harder than necessary. "I'm showing up, Marcus. I'm just afraid I'm doing it wrong." "We're all uncertain." His hand found hers, rough palm against her softer skin. "I haven't kissed anyone except Sarah since I was 23. Haven't wanted to. And then you show up on a mountain road and I can't stop thinking about you, which makes me feel guilty, like I'm betraying her memory. Emily definitely picks up on it because kids are emotional X-rays. I don't want you to forget Sarah. I know, but Emily needs to see that moving forward isn't betrayal, that loving someone new doesn't erase the person we lost." Marcus's voice roughened. "I'm doing this backward. Should be taking you on dates, flowers, and dinners, and getting to know each other slowly. Instead, you're in my house watching kids' movies, and my daughter's asleep on your shoulder. Maybe I don't want slow. Maybe I've had 15 years of slow and careful, and it got me exactly nowhere." They sat in silence for a moment, hands linked, the house settling around them, with creaks that spoke of age and permanence. "Stay tonight." Marcus's voice came out barely audible. "Guest room. Nothing. Just stay. I don't want you driving back to that cabin alone." Patricia should have said no, should have maintained boundaries that would protect them both when this inevitably imploded. But she was tired of shoulds and boundary maintenance and protecting herself from potential hurt. "Okay." Thanksgiving morning arrived with Emily's excited chatter filtering through walls, explanations about parade floats that required Marcus's patient attention. Patricia emerged from the guest room to find them already deep in prep work, Marcus at the stove with the same economical precision he applied to car repairs. Emily taste-testing everything within reach. "Coffee's fresh, mugs in the cabinet to the left." Patricia poured coffee she'd take black and joined Marcus at the counter, watching him work. Need help? Can you dice onions without crying? I'm a CEO. I cry about spreadsheets, not vegetables. Marcus's laugh was warm and genuine, the sound settling something in Patricia's chest that had been vibrating at the wrong frequency for years. They worked in silence, falling into rhythm. Marcus peeling potatoes while Patricia diced, Emily providing running commentary on parade floats from the living room. Domestic and ordinary, and more meaningful than any board meeting Patricia had ever chaired. Maria arrived at noon with her children, 3 adults in their 30s, plus grandchildren ranging from toddler to teenager, filling Marcus's small house with noise and warmth and the particular chaos of family gatherings. Patricia felt simultaneously welcomed and out of place, the only person present who hadn't known Marcus and Emily for years. But Maria pulled her into kitchen duty with the authority of someone who'd decided Patricia's presence was acceptable, teaching her how Marcus liked his gravy seasoned and which dishes Emily would actually eat, versus which she'd push around her plate out of politeness. You're good for him. Maria's voice was quiet enough that only Patricia could hear. He's been existing, not living. You make him want to live again. Dinner was chaos and laughter and more food than 10 people could reasonably consume. Patricia found herself seated between Emily and Maria's grandson, Carlos, 16 and sullen in the way teenagers perfected, who warmed up when she asked about his plans after high school with genuine interest instead of condescension. Emily monopolized her attention between courses, explaining her next science project involving solar energy and water purification, seeking Patricia's opinion on design elements with the assumption that Patricia would have valuable input. Marcus watched them from across the table with an expression Patricia couldn't fully read. Pride, maybe, or hope, or fear that this wouldn't last and Emily would lose another person she'd let herself care about. After dinner, after Maria's family had departed with enough leftovers to last a week, after Emily had fallen asleep on the couch again during football instead of cartoons, Marcus and Patricia did dishes in companionable silence. She called you Mom Patricia earlier. Did you catch that? I caught it. That okay? I can talk to her, explain that we're not. It's okay. Patricia dried a plate with more care than necessary. If that's what she wants to call me, I'm honored. Marcus turned to face her fully, dripping hands forgotten. Patricia, what are we doing? Really? You're upending your entire life for a mechanic in a town you barely knew 3 months ago. I'm inviting you to family dinners when we've barely kissed. Emily's calling you Mom when I haven't even taken you on a proper date. Maybe we don't need proper dates. Maybe we need this. Patricia gestured at the kitchen full of dirty dishes and leftover turkey, more honest than she'd been in years. More than we need dinner reservations and flowers. I can't give you the life you're used to, can't afford trips to Paris or designer clothes or whatever it is CEOs do with their money. I don't want Paris. I want this. You and Emily and Thanksgiving dinners that aren't catered. I want to help with science projects and watch football I don't understand and wake up in a house that feels like home instead of a penthouse that feels like a museum. Marcus pulled her close, soapy hands on her waist, leaving damp marks on her shirt that neither of them cared about. I'm falling in love with you. Have been since you fixed Emily's science fair board with business cards and physics. And it scares me to death because I don't know what I'll do if you leave. Patricia's hands came up to frame his face, feeling the roughness of end-of-day stubble, the warmth of skin against her palms. Then I won't leave. I'll show up every day until you believe me, until Emily believes me, until this stops feeling temporary and starts feeling permanent. They kissed in a kitchen that smelled like turkey and pumpkin pie, dishwater cooling in the sink, Emily sleeping in the next room, both of them too terrified to name what they were building, but too committed to stop. Patricia's phone buzzed in her pocket. Email from Rebecca about Monday's board presentation, the one where they'd officially announced the CEO transition, the one that would make her stepping back public and permanent. She ignored it, chose Marcus's hands on her waist over quarterly projections, chose Emily's gap-toothed smile over market expansion strategies, chose this life over the one she'd spent 15 years constructing like armor. December arrived with snow that turned Ridgemont into a postcard approximation of itself. Patricia spent Christmas Eve in Marcus's living room watching Emily arrange ornaments on a tree that leaned slightly left, the angel on top secured with duct tape and hope. They'd invited her for dinner without ceremony, Emily simply announcing she'd set 4 places, 3 for them, 1 for Mom Sarah's memory, because that's what they did every year. The 4th plate sat empty at the table during ham and mashed potatoes. Emily explained between bites that Mom Sarah always got a plate because she was still part of their family, still loved them from wherever people went after dying. Marcus's hand found Patricia's under the table, squeezed once in what might have been gratitude or warning that this was his life, complicated by grief that didn't follow timelines. Patricia squeezed back, stayed through dessert and dishes, and the ritual of Emily reading The Night Before Christmas aloud while they sat on the couch that had witnessed too many of these moments. When Emily finally went to bed, sugar-crashed and happy, Marcus walked Patricia to her car through snow that crunched underfoot. "Thank you for understanding about the plate. Some people think it's morbid." Patricia brushed snow from her windshield with the inadequate scraper she'd bought at the hardware store, learning that Colorado winters required better preparation than she'd brought from California originally. "It's not morbid. It's love that doesn't know how to stop just because someone's gone." Marcus pulled her close, his jacket smelling like wood smoke and pine needles, both of them ignoring the cold. "I need to tell you something. About why I left college. About what happened after." Patricia's breath caught. This was it, the moment where he'd explain the disappearance that had shaped 15 years of her life, where he'd maybe remember the girl on library steps if she gave him enough context. "My mom died 6 months after diagnosis. Lung cancer took her fast once it started moving. I was with Boeing by then, decent salary, enough to cover hospice and funeral, and the debt she'd accumulated." His voice cracked. "Thought I'd go back to school after, finish my degree, but then I realized I didn't want to be an engineer anymore. Didn't want to spend my life in boardrooms making rich people richer. Wanted something tangible, something real. So you became a mechanic. Took over my uncle's shop in Cleveland. Spent 5 years learning the trade properly, not just YouTube tutorials. Met Sarah at a community barbecue. She taught 3rd grade, loved kids more than most people love anything. We got married 6 months later, because when you know, you know." Patricia's chest constricted. When you know, you know. Had he known with Sarah instantly? Had he ever thought about the girl from library steps? Or had that night been forgettable? One kindness among thousands he'd probably performed. "Riley came 2 years after the wedding. Best thing that ever happened to me." Marcus's hands tightened on Patricia's waist, holding her like an anchor. "Until Sarah got pregnant again when Emily was 3. Complications, preeclampsia that turned severe. Lost the baby at 6 months. Sarah recovered physically, but something broke inside her. Depression that medication helped, but never quite fixed." His voice dropped to something raw. "The car accident. Everyone thinks it was just bad luck. Drunk driver, wrong place, wrong time. But I wonder sometimes if she was driving too fast on purpose, if she saw that truck coming and just didn't move, didn't try to avoid it." Patricia's voice came out strangled. "Marcus, You can't think that. You can't carry that weight. I carry it anyway. Emily lost her mother, and I lost my wife, and some days I can't tell if I'm living or just going through motions, so Emily doesn't lose her father too. They stood in the driveway while snow accumulated on their shoulders, Marcus's confession hanging between them like something physical and heavy. Patricia wanted to tell him she understood loss differently, but equally that her mother's alcoholism had been its own kind of death, watching someone choose oblivion over presence. Wanted to explain that she'd built an empire to escape that feeling of helplessness, only to discover empire building left her just as empty. But this was Marcus's grief, not hers, his moment to be heard rather than fixed. You're living. Maybe not every day, but tonight with Emily and the tree and the empty plate. That's living. That's choosing to honor Sarah by not letting grief consume you. Some days it does consume me. Some days I wake up and forget she's gone, reach for her side of the bed and find it empty and have to remember all over again. His breath ghosted white in the cold. And then you show up, and I feel guilty for wanting you, guilty for being happy, guilty for imagining a future that doesn't include her. Patricia framed his face with hands already going numb from cold. Sarah wanted you happy. That's what people who love each other want, for the other person to keep living even after they're gone. How do you know what Sarah wanted? Because I'd want the same thing. If I loved someone enough to marry them, enough to have a child with them, I'd want them to find joy again, not forget me, but not stay frozen either. They kissed in the falling snow. Two people learning to want things again after deciding want was too dangerous. When Patricia finally drove back to her cabin, her windshield kept fogging from the heat of her own breath, forcing her to stop twice to clear it. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from Rebecca and a text. Board approved the transition. It's official. Your executive chair starting January 2nd. Patricia stared at the message. 13 days. In 13 days, she'd officially stepped back from the company she'd built, hand operations to Rebecca, who was probably more qualified anyway, commit fully to this half-life between Denver and Ridgemont, commit to Marcus and Emily, and the terrifying possibility that she might finally build something worth keeping. New Year's Eve brought decisions Patricia hadn't known she needed to make. Rebecca called at noon, her voice carrying stress that meant problems requiring CEO-level intervention. Southwestern Freight is balking. Want face-to-face meetings weekly for the next 6 months. They're nervous about the transition, need reassurance from you directly. Patricia sat in her Ridgemont cabin looking at notes for her last board meeting Monday, feeling the weight of 15 years pressing against 2 months of something that felt more real than anything she'd built. Tell them I'll do monthly check-ins, video calls weekly, but I'm not commuting to Denver every week. That was the point of stepping back. Patricia, they're 30% of revenue. If we lose them, we won't lose them. They're posturing, seeing if they can keep me tethered despite the transition. Patricia's voice came out harder than intended. I'm done being held hostage by clients who think my physical presence is what makes this company valuable. If they can't trust the system we built, they were never really ours to keep. Silence on the other end, then Rebecca's voice, careful and measured. Is this about the company or about him, the mechanic you've been seeing? His name is Marcus, and yes, it's about him. Also, about Emily and the life I'm trying to build that doesn't revolve around quarterly projections. You're giving up everything you built for a relationship that's barely 2 months old. The words stung because they were true, and because Rebecca didn't understand that sometimes 2 months contained more truth than 15 years of careful construction. I'm not giving up everything. I'm rebalancing. There's a difference. Is there? Because from here, it looks like you're running away from success because it got lonely. Patricia ended the call before saying something she'd regret, sat staring at her laptop, displaying spreadsheets that suddenly seemed like someone else's problem. Marcus was hosting New Year's Eve at his house, small gathering, just Maria and her family, a few mechanics from the shop. He'd invited Patricia 3 weeks ago, casual invitation that carried weight neither of them acknowledged. She should go to Denver, should put on the expensive dress collecting dust in her penthouse closet, attend the party her board was throwing, network with investors who might fund the next phase of expansion, should be CEO for 3 more days and extract every drop of value from the title before it passed to Rebecca. Instead, she put on jeans and a sweater Marcus had complimented once, drove to his house through evening darkness, arrived early enough to help with food preparation that she'd become surprisingly competent at under Maria's instruction. Emily answered the door wearing a sparkly dress that Sarah must have bought before dying, something too fancy for the casual gathering, but perfect for an 8-year-old who wanted to feel special. "Mom, Patricia, you came early. Can you help me with my hair? Dad tried, but it's all wrong." Mom Patricia, not Miss Hayes, not Patricia. Just Mom Patricia, spoken with the casualness of someone who'd decided this was permanent. Patricia's throat constricted. "Sure, sweetheart. What were you trying to do?" 20 minutes later, Emily's hair was arranged in twists that Patricia had learned from YouTube tutorials she'd watched at 2 in the morning, unable to sleep, preparing for a role she'd never auditioned for. Marcus stood in the doorway watching them, expression unreadable. "You're good at that, the hair thing. YouTube is good at it. I'm just following instructions." Sarah used to spend hours on Emily's hair, said it was their special time together. His voice caught. "Emily hasn't let anyone touch it since the funeral." Patricia met his eyes in the mirror, seeing grief and gratitude and fear warring across his features. "Should I not? I can stop if this is—" "No, don't stop." Marcus crossed the room, kissed the top of Patricia's head with tenderness that made her chest ache. "It's exactly what Emily needs. What we both need." The party filled Marcus's small house past comfortable capacity. Maria's grandchildren commandeered the living room for dance competitions that Emily judged with scientific rigor. The adults clustered in the kitchen, eating too much food and arguing about football with the passion of people whose loyalty to teams transcended logic. Patricia found herself explaining logistics optimization to Jake, Marcus's lead mechanic who'd been suspicious of her initially, while he explained engine timing in return, both of them discovering unexpected common ground in systems that required precision and planning. Marcus caught her eye across the kitchen, smiled with warmth that suggested she'd passed some test she hadn't known she was taking. Midnight approached. Emily was fading, sugar and excitement warring with exhaustion. Marcus scooped her up despite protests, settling on the couch with his daughter half asleep against his chest while the television counted down final seconds. Patricia stood beside them, apart but present, watching this family that had somehow become hers without her noticing the transition. When the ball dropped, when everyone kissed and cheered, Emily stirred enough to mumble, "Happy New Year, Dad. Happy New Year, Mom Patricia." Then she was out again, completely asleep, leaving Marcus and Patricia staring at each other across a sleeping chunk. "Happy New Year." Marcus's voice was quiet enough that only she could hear. "Thank you for being here, for choosing this over whatever fancy party you're missing. This is better than any board party could ever be." They kissed carefully, mindful of Emily between them, both understanding that they were sealing something more significant than New Year's promises. They were choosing each other, choosing this life that was messy and complicated, and nothing like either of them had planned. The party wound down around 1. Guests departed with leftovers and well wishes, leaving Patricia and Marcus to tackle cleanup while Emily slept on the couch, too peaceful to wake for proper bed. She trusts you completely. Marcus handed Patricia a dish to dry, the way she just assumes you'll be here. Should I not be? Are we moving too fast? We're moving at exactly the speed Emily needs, which is probably too fast for responsible adults, but exactly right for a kid who spent 4 years convinced everyone leaves eventually. Patricia set down the dish, turned to face him fully. Marcus, I need you to understand something. I'm not leaving. I'm restructuring my entire life to be here, giving up day-to-day CEO duties, pissing off board members and investors, probably tanking my professional reputation as someone who chose personal life over business growth. She took a breath. I'm all in, completely. Whatever this is, whatever we're building, I'm committed. What if it doesn't work? What if 6 months from now you wake up and realize you gave up too much? That small-town life with a mechanic and a grieving 8-year-old isn't actually what you want. Then I'll have learned something about myself. But Marcus, I've spent 15 years building a company that left me empty. I don't want to spend the next 15 wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to choose something real. Marcus pulled her close, hands on her waist, forehead resting against hers. I'm terrified of how much I need you. Terrified of what losing you would do to Emily, to me. But I'm more terrified of not trying, of spending the rest of my life wondering what we could have been if I'd been brave enough to let you in. Monday came anyway. Patricia drove to Denver in pre-dawn darkness, arrived at Donovan Logistics headquarters before anyone else, sat in her office that would be Rebecca's by evening. 15 years of work reduced to boxes of personal effects and a bronze plaque they'd probably install in the lobby. Founder and Executive Chair Patricia Hayes. The board meeting was ceremonial. Everyone knew the transition was happening. Rebecca had been running operations for weeks already, proving herself more than capable. The investors were satisfied, the clients reassured, everything proceeding according to plan. Patricia gave her final speech as CEO at 4 o'clock, standing before the same board that had fought her on every expansion, every risk, every decision that had built Donovan Logistics into a regional powerhouse. Thank you for your trust in this transition. Congratulations to Rebecca, who's more than ready for this role. I look forward to my continued involvement as executive chair, providing strategic guidance while Rebecca handles the operational excellence she's already been demonstrating. She didn't tell them she'd spent the morning planning wedding flowers with an 8-year-old who'd drawn pictures of what bouquets Mom Patricia should carry. Didn't mention that her fiancé was a mechanic who made her happier than closing billion-dollar deals ever had. Didn't explain that success wasn't measured in revenue, but in the number of people who actually cared if you came home. They probably wouldn't have understood anyway. Rebecca walked her out at 6, both of them silent until they reached Patricia's car in the underground parking. You're really doing this, walking away from everything we built. Not walking away, rebalancing. There's a difference. Rebecca studied her with the frank assessment of someone who'd worked beside Patricia for 7 years, who'd seen her at her best and worst, who probably understood her better than Patricia understood herself. You're in love. Actually, genuinely in love. I didn't think that was possible for you. Neither did I. He must be extraordinary. Patricia thought about Marcus's hands on her face, about Emily's gap-toothed smile, about the life they were building from grief and hope and daily choice. He's ordinary. That's what makes him extraordinary. He's just real, present, shows up every day, and does the work of being a good father and a decent human. Doesn't need recognition or applause, just does it because it matters. Rebecca pulled her into a hug that surprised them both. Be happy. Actually, genuinely happy. That's more valuable than any company we could ever build. Patricia drove back to Ridgemont with her boxes of personal effects and the bronze plaque that would never be installed because she'd told them to skip the lobby ceremony, arrived at Marcus's house at 8, let herself in with the key he'd given her last week, found him and Emily on the couch watching a documentary about Mars exploration. Emily scrambled up when she saw Patricia, launching herself with the assumption that Patricia would catch her. She did, held this child who'd decided she was worth trusting, who called her mom without the Patricia qualifier anymore, who'd drawn wedding pictures that currently covered Marcus's refrigerator. How was your last day as CEO? Exactly as boring as expected. How was school? Emily launched into detailed explanation of a substitute teacher who'd gotten the solar system order wrong, requiring Emily's correction, which, apparently, the substitute hadn't appreciated. Marcus rolled his eyes with parental exasperation while Emily defended her actions with scientific righteousness. Normal, ordinary, the kind of evening Patricia had never imagined wanting when she was building her empire. After Emily went to bed, Marcus found Patricia on the porch, needing air and space to process that her life had officially split into before and after. You okay? I'm terrified. Just gave up being CEO of a company worth $70 million. For what? A mechanic and his daughter, and the possibility of building something that might not even work. Marcus pulled her close, his warmth cutting through January cold. And are you regretting it yet? Patricia thought about her empty penthouse, about board meetings where nobody actually knew her, about 15 years of building something impressive that had left her fundamentally alone. No, which probably makes me insane. But no, I don't regret choosing this. Choosing you. Then we're both insane. I'm marrying a woman I've known for 3 months who gave up being CEO to live in a town where she knew exactly one person. Emily's gaining a mother who learned to do her hair from YouTube. We're all making insane choices. The good kind of insane, though. The best kind. They stood on the porch while Ridgemont slept around them. Two people who'd been lonely in different ways, finding unexpected salvation in each other. Patricia's phone buzzed with congratulations texts from board members, from investors, from colleagues who thought she was stepping back to focus on strategy, when really she was stepping back to focus on living. She ignored them all, chose Marcus's arms over networking, chose Emily's drawings over bronze plaques, chose the terrifying uncertainty of love over the safe predictability of corporate success. February arrived with the kind of cold that made bones ache. Patricia had stopped by the shop after her Denver calls, bringing Thai food because Marcus had texted that he'd be working late. Emily was at Maria's for a sleepover, some elaborate fort-building project that required adult supervision and unlimited popcorn. The shop was quiet, except for the radio playing classic rock, some station that cycled through decades like a time machine stuck on repeat. Patricia set the food on Marcus's workbench, watching him work under the hood of a Subaru with the same precision he applied to everything. The song changed. Something indie, guitar-driven, with lyrics about second chances and roads not taken. Patricia froze, the melody triggering memory like a key in a lock. I know this song. Marcus looked up from the engine, grease-streaked and tired, but his smile was warm. Yeah, it's pretty obscure. When did you... He stopped. The smile faded into something more complex as he studied her face with sudden intensity that made Patricia's pulse jump. What? Say that again, about knowing the song. Patricia's heart hammered. I used to listen to this band in college. Had a friend who... She stopped herself, but it was too late. She'd been so careful for 4 months, so careful not to mention Westfield, not to reference the past, waiting for him to remember on his own. Marcus set down his wrench with deliberate care, wiped his hands on a rag, took 3 steps toward her. What college? Patricia's mouth went dry. Does it matter? Patricia. His voice was gentle but insistent. What college? Westfield, Pennsylvania. The words came out barely a whisper. Marcus went absolutely still, the kind of still that comes before earthquakes or revelations, or the moment when your whole understanding of reality shifts 6 inches to the left. When? October 2010. I was a business major, scholarship student. You were engineering, working 3 jobs. My mom was sick. His voice cracked on the word. They stared at each other across 5 feet of concrete floor that suddenly felt like the Grand Canyon. Marcus moved then, closing the distance in 2 strides, his hands coming up to frame her face with a gentleness that contradicted the intensity in his eyes. His thumbs traced her cheekbones, her jawline, as if trying to find the girl from 15 years ago beneath the executive's polish. How did I not? He stopped, shook his head. You changed everything. Your hair, your voice, even the way you stand. You look like someone who owns boardrooms now. 15 years of corporate transformation. I barely recognize myself in old photos. Patricia's hands came up to cover his. But you're exactly the same. Older, weathered, but the same hands, the same voice, the same way you move, like you've got all the time in the world, even when you don't. I looked for you. The confession burst from him like he'd been holding it for years. After Mom died, after I withdrew from school, I tried to find Patricia Miller at Westfield, but you'd already graduated, disappeared. I changed my name, took my father's name, Hayes, buried Miller along with everything else from my past. She managed a broken laugh, spent 15 years trying to become someone who belonged, someone who mattered, and all I did was erase the girl you actually knew. You belonged then. I told you that on the library steps. Did you believe it? Ever? Not for 15 years. Patricia's tears came then, hot and sudden. Not until I broke down on Highway 47 and a mechanic fixed my car without asking for payment. Not until I watched him with his daughter and saw the same kindness he'd shown a scared college kid who didn't know her own worth. Marcus pulled her close, pressing his forehead against hers, his breath coming ragged. I thought about you more than I should have, probably. When I met Sarah, when she asked me on our second date why I treated her like she was precious, I almost told her about this girl I'd met once. Fierce, brilliant girl who looked at the world like it owed her nothing, but she was going to take it anyway. He laughed wetly. Sarah said she hoped I'd find you someday. Thank you for whatever you taught me about seeing people's worth. You loved her so much. She was everything good. His voice broke. And when she died, I thought that was it. I'd had my chance at love, used it up, and then you walked back into my life when I'd forgotten how to want anything except survival. You showed me I could still build something, still love, still hope. They kissed with the desperation of people who'd been lonely too long, finally finding someone who understood that loneliness wasn't the same as being alone. When they broke apart, both breathless, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. The song, the band you loved, I remembered. His voice was soft. "I've been working on something in the shop. After hours. Wanted it perfect before I asked you something important." Patricia pulled back to look at him. "Asked me what?" His smile was crooked, vulnerable, more like the boy from Library Steps than the widowed mechanic. "You'll see soon. Just give me a few more weeks. Let me do this right. Let me show you that you're worth remembering." 1 week after the recognition, Rebecca called Wednesday morning with news that made Patricia's stomach drop. "Southwestern Freight is pulling out. They want you back as CEO full-time or they walk. That's $21 million in annual revenue." Board emergency meeting called for Friday. Patricia stared at her phone in Marcus's kitchen, the choice crystallizing into something sharp and unavoidable. Old life trying to reclaim her versus new life she was still building. Marcus overheard the conversation, his face carefully neutral as he poured coffee. After she hung up, he spoke quietly. "You should go to the meeting. This is your company. You built it. I built it to prove I belonged somewhere. I don't need to prove that anymore." "Patricia, you can't give up $21 million for what? For you? For Emily? For the first time in 15 years, feeling like I'm actually living instead of performing?" Emily appeared in the hallway, still in pajamas, fear stark in her 8-year-old eyes, because she'd learned to recognize the sound of adults making decisions that would change everything. "Are you leaving? Going back to Denver?" Patricia crouched to eye level, held Emily's gaze. "No, sweetheart, I'm not leaving." "But your company needs you. Dad just said—" "My company will be fine. Rebecca is an excellent CEO. But you and your dad, you need me more, and I need you more than I need a company." Emily threw her arms around Patricia with the fierce desperation of a child who'd lost too much already. "Promise? You really promise?" "I promise. No disappearing, no wondering. I'm here." Patricia emailed the board from Marcus's kitchen table. "I will not be attending Friday's meeting." "My answer is no. Rebecca Chen remains CEO. If Southwestern Freight cannot accept that transition, they were never truly our client to begin with. We'll recover the revenue." Rebecca's response came 10 minutes later. "Just got off phone with Southwestern. Told them you said no. They backed down immediately. Wanted to see if they could manipulate you back into day-to-day operations. You called their bluff. I'm proud of you." Marcus read the exchange over her shoulder. "You just walked away from $21 million. "No, I just chose something worth more than $21 million. April arrived with spring that made the mountains look newly minted. Marcus suggested a drive Saturday afternoon, his casual tone undermined by the nervousness in his eyes. Emily claimed prior plans with Maria, too. Casual mention that made Patricia's suspicion flare. "You two are terrible at keeping secrets." Emily's grin widened. Marcus just shrugged, keys already in hand. Highway 47, the mountain overlook. 6 months since Patricia's Mercedes had died here, and Marcus had fixed it without payment, without knowing he was fixing more than a battery terminal. October's sun had been setting when they first met. April's sun blazed overhead now, warm enough that Patricia shed her jacket. Marcus reached behind the seat, produced a small wooden box with precision joinery, visible even from outside. No nails or screws, only interlocking pieces that spoke of hours in his shop, the same care he applied to everything. "6 months ago you broke down on this road. I fixed your car. You offered me money. I said no." His hands trembled slightly despite the steady voice. "What I didn't know was that I'd just met the woman who would fix something in me I thought was broken forever." The box opened. Inside, nestled on velvet, a titanium ring etched with musical notes, not random decoration, but precise transcription. The melody from that indie band she'd loved 15 years ago, the one she'd made him listen to on her iPod on library steps at dawn. Patricia's breath caught. You remembered that song. I remembered everything. The song, the way you looked at me when you talked about building something that mattered, the kiss that made me believe good things could happen to people like us. Marcus's voice roughened. Patricia Miller Hayes, 15 years ago, you showed a scared college kid that kindness mattered, that his stress was valid even when his mother was dying. You set the standard for every relationship I've had since, with Sarah, with Emily, with every person I've tried to help. He took a shaky breath. And then you walked back into my life when I'd forgotten how to want anything except survival. You showed me I could still build something, still love, still hope. You love my daughter like she's yours. You gave up being CEO to make pancakes on Saturday mornings. You learned to do Emily's hair from YouTube at 2 in the morning because you wanted to give her what Sarah can't anymore. Will you marry me? Will you be Emily's mom and my wife and the person I get to choose every single day for the rest of my life? Patricia's voice came out choked with tears. Yes, God, Marcus, yes. He slid the ring on. Perfect fit because he'd spent 3 weeks secretly measuring her jewelry while she slept, taking photographs with his phone, consulting with a jeweler in Denver who'd helped him get the sizing exact. The musical notes caught the light, like a secret only they shared. Emily exploded from behind a boulder 50 yards away, phone held high, recording everything with the dedicated focus of someone who'd been crouching for 20 minutes. She said yes. Can I call her just Mom now? No Patricia part? Marcus pulled Patricia close. Emily crashed into them both, creating a tangle of arms and laughter, and something that felt dangerously close to healing. The valley stretched below them, indifferent to the promises being made on its edge. For the first time in 15 years, Patricia Miller Hayes understood that she'd never needed to build an empire to prove she belonged. She just needed to find her way back to the person who'd always seen her worth. She was home. 6 months later, they stood in Ridgemont's town square, small ceremony, with half the town attending, because that's what happened in places where everybody knew everybody. Emily served as flower girl, gap-toothed smile, incandescent, carrying a bouquet she'd helped choose from the pictures she'd drawn back in January. Maria officiated, having gotten ordained online for this specific purpose. Patricia wore a simple white dress, not Vera Wang or designer labels, just beautiful in the way that mattered. Marcus wore a suit that actually fit this time, tailored properly because Patricia had insisted, and he'd let her win that battle. The vows were simple, Patricia's voice steady as she spoke words they'd written together. You taught me I belonged. I'm spending the rest of my life teaching you the same thing. Marcus's response came thick with emotion. You found your way back when I'd stopped believing in second chances. I'm spending the rest of my life making sure you never regret it. They danced to that indie band song from 2010, live acoustic version performed by a local musician who'd learned it special for the occasion. Emily interrupted halfway through, demanding to dance too, and they swayed together, 3 people who'd found each other against probability, building family from grief and hope and the terrifying choice to try again. In the back row of folding chairs sat an empty seat decorated with flowers, a small framed photo of Sarah propped against the backrest. Her place at the table, always remembered, always honored, always part of the family they were becoming. The reception spilled into Mountain Brew Coffee and Johnson Auto Repair and half of Main Street because Ridgemont didn't believe in keeping celebrations contained. Patricia found herself explaining logistics optimization to ranchers, while Marcus discussed transmission repair with her former board members who'd driven out to witness this improbable union. Rebecca pulled her aside around sunset, both of them watching Marcus teach Emily how to throw a football in the street that had been closed off for the party. "You happy? Actually happy?" Patricia looked at her husband teaching their daughter, at the town that had adopted her, at the life she'd built from the wreckage of her carefully constructed empire. "More than I knew was possible." "Good. That's the only metric that actually matters." Patricia's phone buzzed. Email notification about Donovan Logistics closing a new account that would replace the Southwestern freight revenue within the quarter. She glanced at it, smiled, and put the phone away without responding. Rebecca would handle it. That was the point. Marcus caught her eye across the crowd, smiled with warmth that still made her chest tight even after 6 months of choosing him daily. Emily grabbed his hand, pulled him toward the makeshift dance floor, and he went willingly, laughter carrying across the evening air. Patricia walked toward them, toward her family, toward the life she'd never planned, but somehow always needed. The ring on her finger caught the fading sunlight, musical notes etched in titanium, singing a song only she and Marcus understood. A melody about second chances and roads not taken and finding your way home after 15 years of being lost. Someone asked if she ever missed being CEO, missed the power and prestige and 7-figure deals. Patricia looked at Emily's gap-toothed grin, at Marcus's hands that fixed both cars and broken hearts, at the town that had made space for a stranger who'd needed belonging more than she'd needed billion-dollar contracts. "No, I don't miss it at all. I just wish I'd been brave enough to come home sooner."